Hello guys, I hope you guys are doing well. Favorite schizo philosopher here. Have you guys realized how we are conditioned to work until we die? Well, I've just realized. Well, actually, I haven't. I've been thinking about this for the past year, more or less, since I began my, let's say, my career journey, right? My labor-intensive life, and I've realized that you will become radicalized the more you start, the more you time you work, right? I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, it will make sense now, right? So the thing is, I used to think when I was younger, or at least like 1 year ago, I used to think that you know those YouTubers or like those content creators, people who like they go out, they quit their corporate jobs, they move abroad, and they move to the countryside or they start living in a van. You know, they have this very frugal life in a way, and they have a slow living. They do it chill. I used to think that those people were lazy. I used to think that like, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to aspire to do something like that, right? Like, don't you want to, I don't know, hold a stable job, buy a house, form a family, some stuff like that, right? The most, one could say, conservative ideas, quote unquote, right? I used to think like this. That was when I was unemployed, right? When I didn't have these responsibilities, if you will. Now that I'm employed and I have been employed legally for about a year, I have to say I become radicalized extremely, if anything. Like, to me, now it doesn't make sense to be giving away my life, my this will sound extremely political, right? But I'm trying to keep it as as unpolitical as possible. But I think that will be hard, right? Because this topic is fairly it can be taken in a political way, but I digress. I feel like I'm giving away my life, my energy, my labor, right? I'm giving away all of this in the hopes of, well, first being able to afford my basic necessities such as food, shelter, transportation. Nowadays, I think that's also a need, right? Basic need. I'm doing all this to cover those necessities. Besides, I also aspire to what many people do, like owning a house, like I just mentioned a bit ago. But the problem is that nowadays there's no prospect of owning a house, for example, for young people, right? Essentially, like wages are extremely low in order for anyone to afford such a insane feat, right? It's pretty much impossible nowadays. So, for example, even if I'm gonna use my example, which I think it doesn't only apply to Portugal, but most likely also applies to other European countries, and probably the US, and most certainly any other country around the world, because I think this issue is most likely not localized, it's most likely global, right? So if I were to save 100% of my salary for 5 years, I still don't have enough to buy a house. Maybe, if I'm lucky, I will be able to put down some down payment in order to buy a house. Perhaps, yeah, but that will require me to save 100% of my salary for 5 years, which that is impossible. Thing is, there's also no saving power. Again, talking mostly about Portugal, but I think this issue transpires to other countries anyways, right? There's no saving power. Most of the money that I earn goes straight into bills, straight into paying rent, paying services. And if I'm lucky, I'm able to save up a bit, have a small bit of leeway, for which I will say I'm thankful, I'm happy for that. But, I feel like most people are just one medical emergency away from being bankrupt. And I don't think it should be like that. And I don't think it used to be like that. But again, the point I'm trying to make here is that after you start working, you will become radicalized by the idea or by the realization that your effort does not matter. Your life does not matter in the grand scheme of things when we're talking about corporate life. You don't matter. You're just a number. And if your employer was able to replace you with AI, for example, just to save 2 pennies, they will do it in a heartbeat. And we've seen this happening. It's not something new. It's most likely, I would say, a trend that will unfortunately continue on. So the thing is, as I mentioned, I become radicalized by this idea that there's really no point, which I think also has to do a little bit with the last video I made, which is that it ain't that deep, right? But besides that, what's wrong with my hair, right? Again, I think the main idea here is that I think it's not a bad idea to return to the quote-unquote more traditional lifestyle. What I mean by this is that I don't think it's bad to shift away from cities and to move to the countryside and have a more, one could say, natural, quote-unquote, type of life, a more slow living way. I think that's very good. I think that's very healthy. And I see a lot of people, young people like me, who used to strive towards climbing corporate ladders and being successful internationally, being CEOs or having big names, being famous, being known, being respected. Those used to be the things that most people strive for, which probably people still do nowadays. But I feel like there's a shift towards leaving all of that, leaving all of this rat race, putting it aside, and actually taking care of your life. Because the thing is, also I realized, like, something that happens to a lot of people when they give away their life for corporate is the fact that they work tirelessly for years and years and years, and all of their time goes away into providing for the company, one could say. And then they reach, say, 60, 50, more or less, then they retire. And many people say, okay, once you retire, you can start living your life to the fullest, right? With your pension or whatever. I don't think there's any point in doing that. Like, imagine if I turn 50 or 60 and then I retire. I'm not gonna want to travel. I'm not gonna want to see the world. I should have done that when I was younger, when I had the energy, when I had the health, when I was healthy, and I was strong and able to do that, right? Like right now, for example, I really wanna travel the world. I wanna do other things. I don't wanna I don't wanna be stuck in a cubicle all my life, slaving away, waking up early. For what? This prospect, this idea that's not even gonna be able to materialize? Because again, the point that I'm trying to make is that there's no point in working today. Like, even if you have a good paying job, you're most likely not gonna be able to own a house. What's the point, right? I think it's important to think about these things, right? I think I personally find this idea of like slow living or like van life, or building a cabin in the woods very appealing. I think that's very, very appealing. Most likely because that's more or less the way I was brought up. But yeah, I think this life ain't for everyone. I don't think corporate life is for everyone. There's some people who like it. I personally dislike it a lot. We can talk about office politics as an example, which that could be another video, to be honest, because that topic is way too lengthy, right, to discuss. And I think I went a little bit off road here. again, try and focus on the main idea, which is, again, if you work a full-time job, any job, doesn't really matter which one it is, when you start, you're probably really excited, you're probably young, and you have a lot of energy, and you wanna work, you wanna learn. But after some time, a few months probably, maybe a year, 2 years, you start to realize all of this stress, all of this tiredness that I carry on my soul. What's the use of all of this? What's the use? What's the point? I will know, to be honest. Burnout is one hell of a drug, to be honest. I have experienced it. I would say most likely I am going through it right now, for certain. But yeah, life is complicated, especially when you are burned out. Every single task, doesn't matter how small it seems, becomes impossible to carry. You feel like life is slipping away from your fingers. And I don't think that's how life is meant to be lived. You know? I think the idea here is that life is worth living. It's just that we are not currently in a system that wants us to live the life we can live, if that makes sense. So, yeah, maybe this video is a little bit more doomer pill, and that will make sense because today is Sunday and tomorrow I have to go back to work, right? I'm already tired. I've been doing stuff all week. I wasn't able to rest on the weekend because I was doing house chores. So the thing is, the things you have to do, they never end, right? It's only a string of things that you have to do. So you have to work for the week, you have to prepare on the weekend to go back to your week. So life never ends. But this is not life, that's the thing. This is rat race. And we're not rats. We're not meant to do this. I don't think humans were ever meant to sit in cubicles for 8 hours. Or more even if you're unlucky. So, to anyone who's out there and is willing to hear, is willing to listen, if you're able to, if you can, get out of the shit. Leave that shit. Become radicalized.